So I'm a professor in economics, and I've been focusing on disasters of the natural kind and on climate change. I focus on the economic impact of disasters and disasters of, say, earthquakes or COVID-19, and weather disasters like floods or storms or droughts. So these events are becoming more intense and therefore more damaging to the economy. Quantification is important because policy needs to respond to numbers. So policy, when a policymaker decides, okay, is it worthwhile to spend an X amount of dollars, say, preventing this type of thing? Is it worthwhile to do it? Then we need to understand what happens if we don't do it. And we need to quantify what happens when we don't do it. But the big issue is that the countries that will suffer the most are the ones that are least able to spend on mitigation, to spend on prevention, and to spend on recovery. Their emissions are only a small part of global emissions, and they don't want to reduce them because they also want not to stay poor. In our region, the most sort of notorious example is Jakarta, where Jakarta is lower than sea levels as well and is increasing flooding. The president suggesting or planning to move the capital from Jakarta to some other place that is safer for flooding. This is specifically, I think, for that reason. Now, of course, the price tag on that is humongous. So they're talking about, tens of billions of dollars. That's an example of the cost of climate change. It's much better to prevent than to deal with the aftermath. Some properties on coasts are going to become first uninsurable and eventually untenable. Will they just lose their property? Does the government provide insurance for flooding, for example, because the private sector now perceives the risk to be too high and does not want to insure anymore? So politically, it's more difficult to convince a community that they need to retreat from the coast a bit, although the cost of this for a country like New Zealand is not insurmountable. It's significantly less than, say, what it cost us to deal with the Canterbury earthquakes. We've done a huge retreat in Christchurch in the red zone, where we basically told 20,000 people that they can no longer go back to their house and that they need to go somewhere else, and the government compensated them for that. We don't have an equivalent to that in the climate change space. So how do we pay for these things, and how much should it cost, and what is the right time profile? So is it better to invest today in these things, or is it better to wait maybe for a big event? Within a few years, we'll already live in a world in which some communities will not be able to purchase flood insurance. I think uninsurability is a risk that is much more closer in terms of the horizon than 50 years.